When I saw the family photo on my sister-in-law's Facebook page, everyone smiling by the ocean while I sat at home with my packed suitcase, I realized I had finally been erased. The caption said, "Family trip of a lifetime," but there was no trace of me. Not one message, not one call, and yet, the trip was one I had planned. I remember sitting at my kitchen table that morning, sunlight sliding across the chipped edges of my mug, the coffee gone cold long before I even noticed. My phone screen sat black and silent. 2 days earlier, I had received a single text from my younger brother's wife, Clara. "We had to finalize plans fast. Hope you don't mind sitting this one out this year." Sitting it out? I had organized that family trip for 7 years straight. Our tradition. My parents used to say I was the glue that held us all together. But lately, that glue felt more like invisible tape. Everyone used it when needed, then peeled it off when convenient. I scrolled through that photo again, pinching and zooming like a detective looking for her own ghost. My mother had her arm around Clara, my father held a drink, and my brothers stood in matching shirts by the resort pool. I could even see my niece Mae's sun hat, the one I bought her for her birthday. A piece of me was in that photo, but not my face. Just the remnants of what everyone pretended didn't exist anymore. I closed the app and sat there for a long time, feeling the clock tick loud against the wall. That trip wasn't just a vacation. It was our annual family reset. Every year since my mother recovered from her heart scare, we'd taken 1 week to be all together. Laugh, eat, heal, or at least, that was the idea. Now I knew something was wrong. This wasn't a scheduling mistake. This was intentional, and I had to find out why. Before this silence, family was my sanctuary. I was the eldest, the peacemaker, the organizer. I worked as a teacher at the local school, and though money was tight, my life was simple and warm. Every Sunday was the same. I'd bake banana bread, pack a little tin, and drive out to my parents' house. Dad would be trimming the hedge, Mom humming to old songs in the kitchen. My brothers, Daniel and Michael, would usually stop by with their wives and children. It wasn't perfect, but it was home. I didn't have a husband or children of my own, and that fact had become an unspoken topic over the years. Where my siblings had houses filled with toys and laughter, my home was quieter. Books stacked high by the bedside, an old cat named Jasper curling against my leg when it rained. But I never felt lonely. Not really. Their laughter always spilled into my life. Their birthdays kept my calendar full. And my role, the dependable elder sister, made me feel needed. The last family trip I planned had been to the same island resort they were now posting from. I remembered every detail. The coral sand, the faint smell of lime and sunscreen, the first night when everyone had gathered around a bonfire to sing off-key. It was simple, beautiful, flawed in the way love always is. This year, I had already booked tentative reservations back in March. When I told the family, everyone nodded, but no one confirmed. Mom said, "Let's see closer to the date." You know how plans change. That was the first time I felt a chill. Plans never used to change. We had rituals. I decided not to take it personally. People get busy, I told myself. Clara was handling her new job. Daniel was caring for little Mae. Michael and his wife Lila had just bought a house. It made sense, but then invitations stopped coming. Group chats went silent. Even Mom, who used to call me every other day, began to sound nervous when I brought up the trip. "Maybe we'll just do something small this year," she'd say. You know how exhausting travel can be. Her tone was kind but careful, like she already knew a truth she couldn't yet say aloud. Then came that text from Clara. So casual, so rehearsed. I told myself not to overthink it, but the ache in my chest told me I already knew what it meant. The morning after the photo, Mom called me for the first time in weeks. Her voice was soft, uncertain. "Honey, how are you?" "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile she couldn't see. "You all look happy in that picture." Silence. "Oh. You saw that?" she said quietly. "I did." "Looks like you had good weather." More silence. Then a stifled sigh. "Things were complicated this year. Complicated." That word again? It's the word people use when they don't want to admit something hurtful. I asked what she meant. But before she could answer, Clara's voice echoed faintly in the background. "Mom, can you pass the fruit plate?" Then a quick shuffle, a small click, and Mom said, "We'll talk when I get back, all right?" The line went dead before I could respond. That afternoon, I went for a walk around the block just to clear my head, but even the autumn air felt sharp. Something wasn't right. And deep down I could feel it. It wasn't just about the trip. There was something larger, heavier pulsing beneath the surface of our family. When I got home, I found an email in my inbox from the resort's booking manager, an old contact from last year. "Dear Ms. Hart," it read, "please confirm if you'll still require the group discount for the 10-person suite package." 10-person suite. The same number of people in the photo, and the same package I had originally requested, months ago. Only one thing puzzled me. The confirmation code on the email wasn't mine. The booking had been transferred to a new name, Clara Hart. That was when the pieces began to fit. She had taken my plans, the itinerary, the bookings, the concept, and passed them off as her own. Still, that didn't explain why. Why would she take my role? Why would the whole family go along with it? By midnight, I was sitting at my kitchen table again, surrounded by printed invoices, screenshots, and unanswered questions. I wasn't angry yet. Not really. More hollow, until I reached the bottom of the email thread. There, in the forwarded messages, I found something that made my chest tighten. "Thank you for confirming the Hart family trip, hosted by Clara. The lead guest had previously arranged details but asked that we update the contact name as she's unable to attend." Unable to attend. That's what they told the resort? That I had opted out? I felt my breath catch in my throat. My hands trembled. And for the first time in years, I realized my family had rewritten me out of my own story. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, watching the ceiling glow faintly from the streetlight outside. My mind looped the same questions until the silence turned heavy. Maybe this was some misunderstanding. Maybe Clara took over because I was too slow to book. Maybe Mom just didn't want to hurt my feelings. But even those excuses sounded like sand slipping through a sieve. The next morning, I tried calling Daniel. He answered on the third ring, his voice too bright, too rehearsed. "Hey, sis. Long time?" "Long time? You've been gone for 3 days." He paused. "Right, yeah, time zones, you know. It's been busy. Busy enough to forget to invite me?" There it was. The pause. That small, loaded silence where truth hides. Then, in a soft voice, he said, "It wasn't like that. Clara thought maybe you needed a break this year. You've handled it for so long. A break?" I laughed quietly, the sound thin and shaking. "Daniel, I barely have a life outside this family. Planning these trips was the one thing that made me feel useful," he sighed. "That's not fair." "You're more than useful. Then why did you all go without me?" His voice dimmed. "It's complicated, all right? I can't get into it now. Please, just don't make this bigger than it is. It was already big. It was everything." After the call, I stood in front of the mirror, studying the reflection of a woman who devoted her life to others, only to be erased by them. My eyes looked dull, my smile uncertain. It wasn't vanity that hurt. It was invisibility. For a week, I pretended to move on. I went to work, bought groceries, even smiled at a neighbor who asked about my family. But inside, a slow burn had begun. I couldn't stop thinking about Clara, her voice, her charm, her way of turning every conversation into a quiet performance. She'd always been friendly, but there was something about her that drew attention in a way I never could. The perfect daughter-in-law, the organizer, the one Mom praised for bringing fresh energy into the family. Fresh energy. The same phrase Mom used after my father's heart issues, when Clara arranged his medication schedule like a nurse. Everyone adored her. I had adored her too. Until now. Then, one afternoon, I received another surprise, an accidental voicemail. Clara's voice filled my phone, soft but impatient. "No, Michael, it's fine. She won't show up. She doesn't even know what's going on. Just relax. By the time she figures it out, we'll already have done it." Done what? The voicemail was only 13 seconds long, garbled at the end, but it was enough to light something inside me. I replayed it 5 times, each word cutting deeper. Maybe they were talking about the trip. Or maybe it was something bigger, something almost deliberate. I decided to find out for myself. By Saturday, I had packed a small bag. My vacation days were unused, and I still had the resort address. There was no rule that said I couldn't show up uninvited to a family vacation, especially one they built on my work. When I booked my flight, the agent asked, "Purpose of travel?" "Family," I said, forcing a smile. "It's time to set a few things right." 2 days later, the warm air of the island hit my face like an unfamiliar memory. Salt, coconut, seawater, it all smelled too much like the past. The taxi wound down the palm-lined road until the resort gates appeared, gleaming in the afternoon sun. At the reception, I handed over my passport. The woman behind the counter checked the system and smiled. "You're part of the Hart family group?" "Yes," I said softly. "I'm here a little late." She nodded and handed me a spare key card. "They're in the Sapphire Villa. Pool access, 3rd row down. Welcome." My heart pounded, half from nerves, half from the thrill of reclaiming something stolen. I walked toward the villa, dragging my suitcase through white stone paths, each step heavier than the last. Through the wide glass windows, I could see them, my entire family, gathered around a long breakfast table. Mom laughing, Dad pouring juice, Clara passing a basket of croissants. Even from a distance, she looked perfectly in place, like she belonged in that warm morning light. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and knocked twice. The moment the door opened, silence dropped over the room. Every head turned. Clara froze, holding a pitcher of coffee. Mom stood up so fast her chair scraped the tile. "Sweetheart," she whispered. "You're here." "Yes," I said quietly. "I noticed you forgot to mention the invitation." No one spoke. Daniel looked at Michael at Clara, and then Clara, ever the diplomat, smiled faintly. "We thought you weren't coming," she said. "I don't remember saying that," I replied. "But I suppose mistakes can happen. May I come in?" Mom nodded slowly, stepping aside. "Of course. Your family." The air inside smelled like butter and sunscreen, but beneath it was something else, a tension so sharp I could almost taste it. I set my bag down by the door and looked around. My father cleared his throat, awkwardly offering me a seat. "So," I said after a long silence, "who planned it this year?" Clara's smile faltered. "We all did, really." "That's interesting," I said softly. Because according to the resort manager, my confirmation details were reassigned under someone else's name, and the lead guest was changed. No one moved. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Michael lowered his gaze. I turned to my mother. "Did you know?" She didn't answer. Her lips trembled just slightly before she looked down. That was enough of an answer. For a minute, I stood there, waiting for someone, anyone, to say the truth. But all I heard was the faint hum of the ceiling fan. Finally, Clara spoke. "All right," she said, voice calm, too calm. "Yes, I changed the booking, but it wasn't personal." "Not personal?" I repeated. "You systematically removed me from every message, used my itinerary, and had everyone pretend I chose not to come. What's more personal than that?" Her expression didn't break. "You make everything about you, even when it's not," she said. "The trip is supposed to be relaxing. You always turn it into stress. I wanted it to be easy for once." The words hit hard. She said them casually, but they sliced deep. Mom whispered, "Clara, that's enough." But I wasn't angry anymore. I was strangely calm. There's a moment when shock gives way to clarity, and that moment has just arrived. I looked at the table full of people I loved and realized something had shifted a long time ago, and I had missed the signs. The silence in that room felt almost alive. Everyone stared, waiting for someone to diffuse the situation, but no one dared to move. I could hear the waves outside brushing against the shore, faint and steady, like the world was pretending not to notice the wreckage happening inside that villa. Finally, Daniel cleared his throat. "Look, maybe we all could have handled it better. It's just, things have been tense. You know that." "Tense?" I asked quietly. "You mean since when? Since Dad's retirement? Or since Clara started filling my shoes?" Clara's eyes narrowed. "I didn't fill anything. I stepped up when no one else would. You're busy, remember? Always working, always too tired to join last-minute plans. I thought I was helping." "Helping?" I let out a breath, slow and shaky. "You replaced me without asking. You turned my family tradition into your own. Does that sound like helping?" My father finally spoke. His voice was low, weary. "Enough of this. We're on vacation. Let's not do this here. I turned to him. Dad, with respect, this didn't start here. It started when everyone decided silence was easier than honesty. My mother tried to touch my hand, but I stepped back. You could have told me, I whispered. I would have understood. But you all lied instead. Her eyes shimmered. We didn't want to hurt you. That was the irony. The lie was supposed to protect me, but all it did was confirm what I'd feared most, that my place in the family was conditional, optional, replaceable. Clara sat back in her chair, folding her hands neatly on her lap. All right, she said. You're upset. I get it. But let's be adults. We took a trip. You weren't a part of it. That doesn't mean you're not part of the family. You made this too personal. I didn't reply. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out a thin folder, and placed it on the table. Everyone looked at it. What's that? Daniel asked. Proof, I said quietly. I thought something was off, so I called the billing department at the resort. They sent me copies of payment records for this trip. Care to guess who paid for it? Clara looked at the folder, her expression unreadable. I assume it's all under me. I use my card. I nodded slowly. Actually, it was my account. The one I opened years ago for our family trips. The one everyone still had access to because we agreed to share expenses. Remember that? Their faces went pale. I continued. Someone used the shared account to make these payments. That account had my name as primary. So, Clara, when you changed the booking details, you didn't make a new reservation. You just altered mine. Meaning, technically, this entire trip is in my name. For the first time, Clara's calm cracked, a faint twitch of her jaw. That's ridiculous. I transferred money weeks ago. Not to this account. I slid a printed statement across the table. If you had, I'd have seen it. This wasn't just inconsiderate. It was theft. Mom covered her mouth. Dad looked away. My brothers exchanged silent glances. I'm not here to embarrass anyone, I said softly. But this wasn't an accident. You didn't forget me. You excluded me. And then you used me to fund it. The words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. Finally, Daniel said, Clara, is this true? She pushed her chair back. Oh, come on, you think I stole from her? This is a misunderstanding. I asked Michael to transfer the funds. Maybe it didn't go through. Michael interrupted her. I never transferred anything. Clara froze, her lips parting slightly. I looked at her carefully. So, either you forgot, or you thought you wouldn't get caught. She stood suddenly, her voice sharper now. You're blowing this out. Of proportion. You think you're some martyr holding this family together, but no one even asked you to. You keep score of every favor, every kindness. That's not love. That's control. Her words stung because part of me feared she was right. But even if she believed it, it didn't excuse what she'd done. I kept things running because no one else would. I said quietly. You know what control looks like, Clara? Erasing someone, pretending they don't exist so you can take their place. That's control. No one spoke. Even my father, usually quick to end the tension, seemed unable to meet anyone's eyes. That's enough, I finally said. Enjoy your vacation. I won't take that from you. But when we get home, I'll be closing that family fund. From now on, everyone pays their own way. Clara gave a bitter little laugh. You can't just cut us off. I looked at her. Watch me. Then I turned, picked up my bag, and walked toward the door. My mother called after me, but I didn't stop. My body trembled as I stepped into the blinding sunlight outside. The ocean wind hit my face, cooling the tears I hadn't realized were falling. I walked down to the quiet part of the beach, far from the villa's laughter. I stood there for a long time, watching the waves kiss the sand and retreat, over and over. Somewhere behind me, I heard footsteps. Daniel's voice came, softer now. You're really leaving? I nodded. I can't stay where I'm only half welcome, he sighed. I didn't know about the account thing. I'm sorry. I know, I said. But you went along with it anyway. That's what hurts. He looked down. Clara can be persuasive. She's not the only one to blame. He didn't argue. He just stood there kicking at the sand, his face caught between shame and sadness. Then he said, You know, for what it's worth, everyone knows you're the one who holds us together. Even when they pretend you're not. I smiled sadly. That's the thing about glue, Daniel. It's invisible until it breaks. He gave a slow nod, then turned back toward the villa. And I stood there watching the sun climb higher, feeling strangely weightless. For years, I had built my worth around being needed. But in that quiet moment, I realized something freeing. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for them to see me. Maybe it was time to see myself. Still, there was one last thing left to do before I left that island. Something Clara wouldn't see coming. That night, the island glowed softly under the moonlight. Guests strolled along the lantern-lit paths, laughing and sipping cocktails, the sound of clinking glasses mixing with the music from the beachside bar. I sat alone on a bench near the pool, the hotel keycard still heavy in my pocket, my thoughts restless. Part of me wanted to leave right then, take the next morning flight home, disappear quietly. But another part, the quieter, stronger part, knew. Leaving without saying my truth would mean letting Clara's version of me become permanent. And I couldn't do that, not anymore. I wasn't after revenge. I just wanted the truth to breathe, even if it hurt. The next morning, I went to the front desk. The same receptionist smiled at me, unaware of the storm beneath my calm voice. "I'd like to make a small request for the Hart family," I said. "Of course, ma'am, how can I help?" "Could you add my name back as the lead guest on the booking?" "I'll authorize it here. I'm the original account holder." She verified the records, nodded politely, and typed quickly. "All set. You're listed as the primary now." "Thank you," I said. "Also, I'd like to settle the pending balance, personally, and book the dining hall for tonight's family dinner." "I'll surprise them." The receptionist smiled again, oblivious to what that dinner would become. By evening, I was ready. I wore a simple white sundress and no makeup, just a quiet determination that felt like armor. As I entered the dining hall, staff nodded and began setting candles on the long table I reserved. I stood by the entrance, waiting as the family arrived one by one, drawn by the same message I had sent that morning. Dinner tonight. My treat? Let's talk like a family should. They arrived uncertain, whispering among themselves. Clara walked in last, her hand locked around Daniel's arm, her smile practiced but brittle. "Didn't expect this," she said softly. "No," I replied. "I imagine you didn't." When everyone sat, I lifted a small glass of water, my fingers steady. "Before we eat," I began, "I want to thank you all for coming. It's been a strange week, hasn't it? I know there are things we've all avoided saying. But sometimes silence costs more than truth." No one spoke. The only sound was the hum of a ceiling fan and muffled island music drifting from outside. I continued. "I didn't come here to embarrass anyone or make a scene. I came because this trip was supposed to mean something. For years, we've called this a family tradition, our way of staying close, healing, remembering who we are. But this year, it turned into something else entirely." My voice softened. "I spent my savings to plan our vacations. It wasn't about money, it was about keeping us connected. So when I found out Clara transferred my booking and took over, yes, it hurt. But what hurt more was realizing that no one noticed, or maybe that no one cared." Clara shifted in her chair. "I've already told you I didn't mean harm." "Clara," I interrupted gently, "this isn't just about you. It's about all of us. Somewhere along the way, we started mistaking convenience for care. We stopped calling. We stopped checking in. We let the person next to us believe they didn't matter, and we convinced ourselves it was kindness to stay quiet." Mom's eyes glistened. "Sweetheart," I shook my head. "Mom, please let me finish. I spent days wondering what I'd done wrong. Maybe I was too controlling, too strict, too involved. But truth is, I was just trying to belong, like everyone else." The words trembled but didn't break. This family used to know how to love loudly. Somewhere, between Clara's charm and everyone's busy lives, that love turned into politeness. And I'm done mistaking politeness for affection. The room fell silent. Even the air seemed to pause, heavy with years of unspoken things. Then I turned to Clara. "I know you didn't mean to become the villain in this story. You do everything to be admired, and for that, I can't even hate you. But admiration without honesty isn't love either. You wanted to fit in. I understand that. But not at the cost of erasing someone else." She looked down, her lips pressed tight. "I didn't think you'd care this much," she murmured. "I care because family is supposed to be sacred," I said. And once it stops being that, what are we even left with? No one dared to speak. A few tears slipped down my mother's face. My father looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time in years. I stood up, placing my palms on the table. That's all I wanted to say. From now on, I'm stepping back, not out of anger, but out of peace. You can plan trips, gather, celebrate, do whatever makes you happy. But I won't be the one holding it together anymore. Mom started to protest, but I smiled gently. It's all right. This isn't punishment, it's freedom. I turned to the staff and nodded. They brought out the dinner I'd arranged, simple comfort food, the kind we used to eat on Sunday afternoons. Mashed potatoes, grilled vegetables, my father's favorite lemon fish. I'd even ordered a small cake that said, "To new beginnings." Slowly, tension eased. Daniel picked up his fork first, then Michael. Even Clara took a bite, avoiding my eyes. Dinner ended quietly, but not coldly. When it was over, I stood up and said my goodbyes. My mother clung to me, whispering, "I'm sorry for everything." I hugged her back and whispered, "Mom, sometimes families break a little before they find their shape again." As I stepped out into the warm night air, I felt lighter than I had in years. The truth had done its work. It had burned, but it had also cleansed. Back in my room, I packed my bag, the steady rhythm of the waves outside like a heartbeat guiding me home. Before sleep, I wrote a note and sent it to the family group chat. I love you all. I won't chase anymore, but my door is always open when you choose to knock. I turned off my phone and lay back, the moonlight spilling through the thin curtains, touching everything in silver and peace. In that quiet, I realized I wasn't leaving empty. I was leaving whole. The flight home was quiet. I sat by the window, watching the ocean fade into clouds, replaying everything in my mind. The silence, the confrontation, and those faces I had loved for so long looking back at me in stunned silence. I didn't regret a single word. Maybe for once, I had let them see what I felt instead of just managing what they felt. For years, I had believed family loyalty meant endurance, staying, forgiving, trying again. But somewhere in those long nights of cooking meals no one thanked me for, and planning gatherings no one appreciated, I had confused loyalty with self-erasure. It took being excluded to finally see that. When I arrived home, Jasper, my old gray cat, greeted me at the door, meowing as if he could sense the heaviness I carried. I dropped my bag, knelt on the rug, and held him. His fur was warm, soft, grounding. For the first time in days, I cried without needing to hide it. Not because of anger, but from the exhaustion of pretending everything was fine. The house felt different now. Quiet, yes, but not empty. I made myself tea and opened the curtains wide. The sun poured in, filling the little room with gold. I realized how much I had missed this. The peace of my own space, the absence of competing voices, the small freedom of not needing to please anyone. Over the next few days, I went to work, smiled at my students, and tried to slip back into my usual rhythm. But something inside me had shifted. I stopped checking the family chat obsessively. I cooked for myself, not for gatherings. I reread old journals and finally admitted what I had been too proud to say before. I built my life around people who didn't know how to handle love that expected accountability. About a week later, I received a letter in the mail. Real paper, handwritten, in my mother's careful script. The sight of it made my chest tighten. I opened it slowly and began to read. "My dear Anna," it began. "I don't know if words can fix what we've done. I saw your eyes that morning. You looked like someone who had been carrying us all for too long. I should have protected you, but instead I let quietness protect my comfort. That was wrong. Clara has admitted her mistake. She'll have to face her own lessons. But I hope someday you'll let yourself come back to us, not because we deserve it, but because you deserve to be surrounded by love that's finally honest." The letter ended with, "We're proud of you, even when we forget to show it." I held the page to my chest for a long time before slipping it into my drawer. I wasn't ready to respond, not yet. Healing wasn't about running back. It was about standing still long enough to let the hurt breathe. 3 evenings later, as I walked home from school, I passed a small travel agency I used to visit for brochures. The window display showed bright posters of places I'd once promised to visit someday. My reflection in the glass looked different, lighter, quietly defiant. I stepped inside. The woman behind the counter smiled. "Looking for a family package?" she asked automatically. I smiled back. No, just one ticket. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I can see the world for myself. She nodded, shuffling through the pamphlets. We have a few options. Traveling alone? Yes, I said, surprisingly steady. But not lonely. I ended up booking a small cabin trip up north. Forests, lakes, peace. The kind of place I could actually listen to my own thoughts without noise or apologies. It felt like reclaiming something. Before leaving, I texted Daniel. I'm going away for a bit. Don't worry. I'm okay, he replied almost instantly. I'm glad you're doing something for you. We all needed our wake-up call. I smiled at the screen, my heart strangely calm. 2 weeks later, I stood at the edge of a crystal-clear lake, mountains reflected across the water. The silence here wasn't heavy, it was alive. I sat on the wooden pier, dipping my feet into the cold water. It grounded me, pulled me back to myself. Sometimes I'd think about Clara, whether shame had reached her, whether she ever truly understood what she took from me. But more often, I thought about the lesson I learned, that doing everything for others doesn't guarantee you'll be loved, only that you'll be useful. And those are not the same. On the fourth night, I wrote a small note in my journal. I forgive them all, but I won't forget the feeling of being unseen. It is my guidepost now. Never again will I shrink just to fit. That became my promise. When I returned home, the season had changed. The trees outside my window had begun to thin, their leaves scattered like gold confessionals on the ground. It was beautiful in a quiet way, a reminder that endings weren't always tragedies. Sometimes they were just doorways. A week later, my father called me. His voice was cautious, a mix of hope and humility. Your mother wants to have everyone over for dinner next month, he said. Only if you feel ready. I paused for a moment. I'll think about it, I said gently. But tell her I'm proud of her letter, he sighed, relieved. She really means it, you know. I know, I said. That's what makes it easier to believe again. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the sky fade into dusk. I knew my family wouldn't change overnight, but they had heard me. And sometimes that's all a person needs, not perfection, but acknowledgement. Jasper jumped onto my lap, purring. I stroked his back and whispered, "We made it through." The house was still, but it didn't feel lonely anymore. The kind of peace that comes after a storm isn't silent. It hums softly, like calm settling onto open wounds. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval to start again. I already had. When I think back to that trip now, I don't feel bitter anymore. If anything, I feel gratitude. Because sometimes the people who break your heart are the ones who finally hand you back your own life. For me, being left out wasn't the end. It was the beginning of learning how to stand alone with grace. Family doesn't always mean comfort. Sometimes it means growth through discomfort. And love, real love, can only live where truth is allowed to breathe. If someone in your life has ever made you feel invisible, don't chase their vision of you. See yourself clearly first. That's where peace begins. Tell me in the comments. Would you have gone on that trip to face them? And if my story spoke to something in you, don't forget to subscribe for more. Your support is what keeps stories like mine alive.